Hello. In this lecture, I'm going to talk about assessments and their role in shaping performance. There are three questions that I want to cover, and they are in regards to assessments of others by managers. The questions are pretty deep and involved, but they'll help clarify a few things. The first question: does the manager's treatment of the employees affect the employee performance? The second question: is there a link or a connection between the performance of the employee and the preconceived notions a manager has about the employee? And the third question: are the managers objective in their assessment of others? Now, these questions are in depth and involved, and they may be a lot to handle, but don't worry. They will help clarify problems that managers face in regards to staying clear and objective. Okay, let's move on to the first question. Does the manager's treatment of the employees affect the employee performance? The reality is that managers tend to treat employees based on what the managers perceive their abilities to be. This is a bit problematic. For example, if a manager perceives a worker to be good, it actually impacts that worker's ability to do work, and that worker ends up performing better than if they were perceived to be bad at their job. Let's consider a more comprehensive example. Okay, there are two managers. One manager was advised that he had the best performing employees in the company. The other manager was told that he was assigned average and below average employees. The truth? Well, they both had employees of equal abilities. The interesting thing is, the manager who believed he was in command of the better employees treated those employees in such a way that he managed to get much better performance on the project than the other manager. So what happened? Well, in believing to have superior employees, the manager had actually done more, had communicated more, had delegated more, had demanded more, and pushed harder. All of these things resulted in a more successful project. So the manager's beliefs as to the quality of the employees led to treatment which impacted the employee performance. So the answer to our first question is, yes, the manager's treatment of the employees does affect employee performance. Now let's move on to the second question. Is there a connection or a link between the performance of the employee and the preconceived notions a manager has about the employee? Again, this is a very interesting question. So, is it possible that our internal and hidden beliefs could affect the performance of others? Well, to answer this question, I'm going to refer to an older experiment. This idea was actually explored in an experiment conducted by Lenore Jacobson and Robert Rosenthal in 1968 with teachers and school children. Okay, the experiment, it revealed some interesting notions about human behavior, which is actually very relevant to management practice. In the experiment, the experimenters informed the teachers that some children from the group would likely develop intellectually faster than the rest of the children. This would happen throughout the entire academic year. The teachers, now believing that some of the children would develop faster, actually treated those children differently than the rest of the children. They treated those children with more care, with more attention, and with more encouragement, without realizing it. By receiving this special treatment, the children had actually studied harder, and did in fact develop intellectually faster than the rest of the class. This was shown as they had received higher verbal scores and IQ scores than the rest of the class. This goes to show that, in being treated better, the person will perform better. What can we apply to the management practice? Well, in the management practice, if a manager were to criticize an employee, it is likely the employee will do bad work. On the other hand, if the manager were to act with more care, with more encouragement, it is likely the employee will offer better performance. So to answer our question, the performance of the employee is linked to the original belief the manager has about the employee. And now I'd like to answer the third question. The question is, are the managers objective in their assessment of others? Now, it would be nice if the answer were yes. However, there are subjectivity factors which often get in the way of objective assessments. So, that was a little bit confusing. What does this actually mean? Well, let me rewind a little bit. A common problem that people face has to do with how their perception of others affects their behavior towards them. For example, if one believes another to be capable, they will look at that person a little bit more favorably. However, people are subject to biases, which means that the assessments, they're not objective. The reason I mention this is, unlike the average person, managers, they're supposed to be professional in their approach, and that means they have to be analytical and objective. They can't be subject to biases, or else they're not going to do a very fair and effective job. Unfortunately, managers are subject to factors which alter their perception of the employees. To demonstrate this idea, I'm going to give two examples of possible factors. The first factor I'm going to talk about is the horns effect. Under this effect, we assume that the manager has a very important task that needs to be accomplished. We assume that the manager assigns this very important task to an employee. Now consider how the manager would view that employee if they were now to fail at this all-important and very important task. Obviously, the manager is going to be quite unhappy with the employee and would probably perceive them to be incapable and very poor at their job. The employee is now said to have horns. Whatever they do from now on, even if they were to do a good job, it would not likely be visible or recognized. What's unfair about this effect is, even if the employee had a history of good achievements, they will no longer be recognized at the level they should be. Had the manager been a bit more objective and used recorded logs and evidence spread out over a longer evaluation period, the manager would have recognized that even though the employee did not achieve the all-important task, the employee was a good performer overall. To contrast this effect, I'm going to describe a little bit about another factor, which is the halo effect. Under this effect, we assume that a manager assigns the very important task to an employee. But now we assume that the employee succeeds at this all-important task. Under this condition, the manager will think that the employee to be absolutely amazing. Even if that employee were to have performed poorly in the past, they will now be seen in a positive light. The manager is blinded by the halo of the employee that has succeeded at this very important task. These effects show that human behavior is not always evidence-based, but can be affected by subjectivity factors. So, in being aware of these factors, managers are able to be more objective and analytical in their approach in their practice.